following article was published March 8, 1916, in a Christian magazine, and it's called Species Still in Evolution's Way. No signs of yielding are shown by the stubborn fact that the origin of species cannot be explained, and the naturalistic scheme of science and the coordinate fact that species as we find them in nature are immutable, each one disposed and determined to be just what it is, and to remain that. And still, the apostles of spontaneous evolution continue to advance their claims. Their persistence in presenting their untenable theories makes it undesirable that our opponents continue to present the argument from species. Professor L.T. Townsend, LLD, does this in the Bible Champion, where he publishes an article on everything after its kind. He quotes the following verses from Genesis and holds that their truth has stood the test of all scientific discovery. And these verses go, "And God said, Let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God created great sea monsters, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, and after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good." End quote. These revelations are uncontradicted by anything yet discovered by scientific research. And these announcements in Genesis are clearly against the theory of evolution for all time, says the scientist. He follows these assertions with various instances from the field of scientific research and discovery. In all of them, the immutability of species is clearly shown. The first is taken from the word in which species might seem to be of the floating or unstable order. But we are told in the Bible, beginning low down in the scale of living things, it is found that seaweed for millions of years, as the scientists say, has brought forth after its kind seaweed and nothing else. Going higher in the vegetable kingdom, this writer says that nothing different is discoverable. During several weeks in spring, in our northern latitudes, the air is full of pollen from thousands of varieties of flora, but each bit of pollen fertilizes its botanical mate and no other. The incipient bean pod can be fertilized only by the pollen of a bean blossom. The cells of the independent corn cob fend off even the pollen of the most beautiful rose, and are fertilized only by the pollen of the corn tassel. Nor do beans and corn ever cross. The half corn stalk and half bean or potato vine, or the half rose and half something else, are unknown to the student of botany. As for animal life, in the waters, the same absolute refusal to cross species is apparent, although the wonder is that under the conditions species can so perfectly persist. This law is no less pronounced in water than in life on land. The multitudes of fish of many kinds, from the minnow to the whale, mingle, breed, and multiply, some of them with astonishing rapidity, yet they never cross to such an extent as to bring forth a new and permanent species, notwithstanding the prodigality, of their numbers and the improvident easting of their spawn. The naturalist is able to keep on his work with classifications that are a half-century old. And in the waters of the state of Florida, including both coasts, there are 600 varieties of fish, and in the Amazon basin there are 700. How is it possible to prevent crossing and the consequent daily appearance of new varieties of fish is a problem not yet solved by the naturalist. As for species which are now extinct, it is found that they were just as opinionated about remaining what they were as our present-day species. There are 500 species of trilobites that, through millions of ages, as scientists claim, were reproducing themselves, but not a fossil has been found showing that any of those species ever produced anything but a trilobite. The same is to be said of the 900 extinct species of ammonite, the 400 species of the nautilus, and the 700 of the ganoids. Even the bacteria which produce our diseases, according to modern science, bow to the inexorable law of immutable species. Microscopic disease-producing bacteria, in which the scientific world in late years has been profoundly interested, constitute families concerning which there are many opinions. This one fact is established that each species among microbes not only produces that specific disease for which it is named, as such Bacillus tetanus, Bacillus typhosus, Bacillus zoonosus, and so on, but each bacillus inevitably and invariably produces a bacteria like itself. Were this not so, there could be no science or bacteriology, and medical science would be in direct confusion, for a half-dozen familiar diseases, and also many that are unheard of, might overtake the patient before the first one had had its run, that is, provided any of these bacilli could produce hybrids, or if transmutation among them were possible. Nothing is found when the realm of what scientists call bioplasts is entered. Bioplast, as nearly as one can arrive at it without himself being a professional scientist, seems to mean almost the same as cell, and that seems to mean a unit in the structure of a living organism. Of the bioplast, this professor tells us the same is true of the millions of minute bioplasts that construct the human body, and also the bodies of every living thing in the vegetable and animal kingdoms. They not only attend strictly to their own business, but each bioplast produces one of its own kind and no other. If crossing of species among bioplasts were possible, there would be no assurance that sports instead of things normal would not prevail everywhere. We mean this: were it not for the seemingly irrevocable law or invincible force that prevents crossing among bioplasts, one human being might grow as tall as the mammoth tree of California, or have a nose as long as the trunk of an elephant, or might be half man and half crocodile, or a monstrosity of the same sort. This inexorable law applies, according to this article, even to the structureless germs of science. Even the structureless germ of one of our species of plants or animal never changes into the structureless germ of any other species. That is, every structureless germ in all living things is immutable, all of which is confirmatory of bringing forth of everything after its kind, as is recorded in the book of Genesis. How positively persistent the law is in the insect world is seen from the following. There are many varieties of the beetle family, 42 having been classified in the state of Illinois alone. Yet they are so consistent in their capitulatory structure, writes Professor S.A. Forbes, that one of my assistants, who had handled over 10,000 specimens of one species, says they are all like castings from the same mold. A word of explanation in regard to the sports mentioned above may be necessary. It may be noted in passing that the variations between individuals of the same species, called sports, occurring among both plants and animals, make nothing against like producing like, and nothing in favor of evolution. Says Professor Cope, sports seem to have been of no importance in evolution whatever. In fact, the effort of nature appears to be to produce the individuals of each species as nearly alike as possible, and doubtless would succeed perfectly in this effort were it not for differences in nutrition, environment, and impulse. Were these agencies identical, and were there no supernormal interposition, it is safe to say that each germ cell, as well as each full-grown tree or animal, would produce one precisely like itself, and would keep up this identity to the end of time. Those who have read the essays of evolutionists will recall that their theory of origins of species calls for much faith in the persistence of variations, which occasionally occur in single specimens in a species. And on this point, Professor Townsend has this to say. Nature seems to guard against an abnormal variations even when there were apparently good reasons for variation. For instance, the blacksmith's biceps are increased and the carpenter's palms are calloused by their daily toil. If, therefore, these and other betterments, were inherited, there would be, after a few generations, family differences that would almost allow of new classification. There might be men with biceps and palms hard as bone, but the cultivated characteristics not being inheritable, the blacksmith's baby's biceps are the carpenter's baby's palms are scarcely distinguishable from those of the baby whose father never lifted a sledgehammer or pushed a foreplane. At this point, therefore, evolution receives another setback, for as Mr. Darwin has shown, variations must be inherited, otherwise they are of no account in the scheme of evolution. And worse than this, if the variations are much of an improvement over the characteristics of the parents, the descendants all the sooner become sterile, which contravances the claim of the evolutionist that all organisms consistently and constantly tend to perfection and finally reach perfection. We add a paragraph from the writer's summary. We need not go further into the details of the subject, but will add to what already has been said, this general statement, that there are now listed the names of 200,000 living species of plants and nearly 400,000 living species of animals, and these estimates are enlarged by many scores every year. It is still further estimated that during the entire vital period of the Earth, there have been 125 million species, which an estimate is numbers of the different individuals belonging to those different living and extinct species, is beyond comprehension. Yet in the range of geological history, say 100 million years, there has not been discovered either in the upheaved strata in the past or in the deep-sea dredging of the present, a single case where an animal, vertebrate or invertebrate, or a plant of any kind by fortuitous selection or by fortuitous variation or by crossing natural or artificial, has brought into existence a single species, clearly marked, new, and fixed species of plant or animals.